Hi there again everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, then my name is Claire, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. We're all about makeup on this channel and some true stories, because today I thought I would do a true crime story. I'm absolutely obsessed with true crime, like everybody is at the moment. We're all completely obsessed with it. So I thought I would just do a little video on it. I'm really into the more historic cases because you know it takes so long to catch people and they just get away with so much. Those ones really intrigue me. The ones kind of before like DNA or just all of that type of thing, you know, people just got away with so much stuff. So I thought I would just do a true crime story on that today because I'm just absolutely loving it, and I thought I'd share it with you. These is just information that I've gathered off the internet and compiled into a story. All opinions are my own opinions, you know, and if you have different opinions or the same opinions, let me know in the comments down below. But I'm just going to jump right into this story, and I'm going to do my makeup at the same time. So grab your drink, grab your beer, whatever you're gonna do, get some snacks, whatever, and we're gonna jump right into the story of Jolly Jane, or the Angel of Mercy. Now, Jolly Jane, or Jane Toppin, was an American female serial killer with the nickname of Jolly Jane, and we'll find out why later on in the story. But she was a nurse, and she was convicted of killing 31 of her patients. Yes, 31. So I mean, about more historic cases, I mean, in this day and age, would you have got to victim 31 without someone figuring it out or stopping you? You know, this is just what completely intrigues me. Okay, so Jane, or forgive me if I get this name wrong because I'm absolutely terrible with pronunciations and stuff. I think it's Aurora Keller, was born on the 31st of March in 1854. She was born in Boston to Peter and Bridget Keller. Now, Peter and Bridget were poor Irish immigrants to Boston, and Jane was one of 4 children. Jane was actually the youngest of the 4 children. So Jane didn't have the most stable of childhoods. Her mother actually died of TB or tuberculosis when she was just a year old, and her father wasn't the most stable person at all, really. So Jane's father, Peter, was he was a tailor, and at one point it's rumoured that he actually sewed his own eyes shut. Yeah, so when we say he's not the most stable person, he's not the most stable person, because who in the right mind sews their own eyes shut? So he was also known as Kelly the Crack, obviously because his surname was Keller. And when I think of like, we're the Crack, it's like we're having a laugh. I don't know anywhere else in the world, but you know, you go out, say if you went on a night out and someone was like, oh, did you have a good time? Like, yeah, we had a really good crack. So take from that what you will. You know, some people might think that it was a bit of a lunatic based on that, but you know, for me, where I'm from in Manchester, you know, we have a crack. So it is said that he did try to raise his children, but there were suspicions that Jane and her other siblings were being abused. So in 1863, when Jane was just 6 and her sister Delilah was just 8 years old, her father took them to the Boston Female Asylum, which was an orphanage in Boston, obviously. So rumours are that Delilah supposedly became a prostitute and an alcoholic. So, you know, I think her father did suffer from substance abuse issues as well. So, you know, poor Delilah. And later on, Delilah supposedly was committed to an insane asylum also. So from the orphanage or female asylum, Jane went to work for a family, and the head of this family was Anne Toppin, and this was in, forgive me if I'm wrong, Lowell, North Boston. So there was an absolute stigma to being Irish back then. So Anne did pass Jane off as an Italian girl, and so told people that Jane's parents had died. So although the family never formally adopted her, her name was changed to Jane Toppin. So the family already had a daughter who was called Elizabeth. It's said that Elizabeth did try to get on with Jane, however Jane like really resented Elizabeth, probably because Jane was treated as a servant. She was an indentured servant within the Toppin household, which basically means she was there to just serve them. So as the story goes, Jane was a little bit of a fibber. She was known to tell lies, and not just like little white lies. She was known to tell like absolutely outrageous, like some stonking lies. Like her sister was married to an English nobleman and her father was sailing around the world. You know, maybe she didn't want to admit that her father and sister were just in insane asylums. I mean, I'm assuming the father was at that point after sewing his eyes shut. Who knows back then? They may have just, you know, let him get on with it. So when Jane was 18, she was released as a servant, an indentured servant, which basically means that, you know, they're a kid that you've got from an orphanage and they're just gonna be your skivver until they're 18. But once Jane turned 18, she chose to stay with the Toppin family. You know, and I can kind of understand why. She probably didn't have anywhere else to go, you know. Nobody knows where her family was at this point in time. So, you know, why wouldn't she stay with the Toppin family? It's probably more or less all she's ever known. So, once Anne Toppin had passed away, Elizabeth did take over the household. It says that, you know, that she was Jane's foster sister, but you know, I would use that term quite loosely because Jane was the servant. So Elizabeth did marry a man named, I want to say, Armel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't pronounce his surname. Brigham. And he was a church deacon. Now, as the story goes, there was a little bit of a dispute which did cause Jane to move out of the family household where she'd lived like 20 years. So in 1887, Jane began nurse training at the Cambridge Hospital in Massachusetts. Oh my god, I'm not that bad at pronouncing stuff. So it was at the Cambridge Hospital that Jane did earn the title of Jolly Jane, basically because she had a cheerful disposition. She was known by the patients for her bright personality, and she was really well liked by the patients. However, Jane did like a good old gossip, and used to really gossip about her colleagues, which, you know, didn't do her any favours in the old colleague department. So this gossiping literally did Jane no favours. It made her quite disliked with her colleagues, even though she was liked by her patients. You know, and I can get that. She used to kind of make up lies and just like gossip about people. You know, why? Office gossip, you can't get away from it, can you? Even back in the 1800s, it happened. So she was still a bit of a liar as well, you know. It's not something that she did when she was a kid and she'd grown out of. She still liked to tell a little fib or two. You know, she often told her colleagues that the Tsar of Russia had offered her a nursing job. So Jane, having this bright personality, was well liked by patients, and she really got on with the more elderly patients. And, you know, and she would pick patients that were elderly and quite poorly, and, you know, they thought she was just being nice. She had this bright personality, you know, and she was just being, you know, bright and friendly with them. So Jane did like to experiment on these more elderly and vulnerable patients, and she'd use a mix of like morphine and atropine and just experiment on the patients and kind of see what different doses would do to them and how it would affect them, you know, as you do being a nurse. You know, she liked to alter the dosages into the nervous system to just see what effect it had on them, you know, whether it was enough to basically kill them. So Jane did sometimes like up the dosage to just kind of watch them suffer a bit before they died. So Jane would like, she'd falsify charts to say what dosage she'd given her patients. You know, she continued to medicate her patients, and sometimes she would even get into bed with them as they were dying. Apparently she said that she kind of gained some kind of sexual thrill from this, from just staying with the victims as they passed away. And it said that, you know, that she had strong feelings towards the elderly patients, and this strong feeling was that they were useless. So this could have been why she experimented on them more than anything else. I'm just speculating. So the Cambridge Hospital did become a little bit concerned about Jane's obsession with autopsies. However, they were really unaware of what was going on. But when you've got a nurse, and see, this is the thing about historic cases, this is what blows my mind. You've got a nurse and she must have had a lot of fatalities, whether it's because they were old and old people really did just die back then, and there wasn't all the medications and things that are around now, that they did just pass away. But yeah, today you'd be like, what is happening? So apparently one of Jane's patients, Amelia Pinner, in 1887 said that Jane had given her some like a bitter tasting medicine. So obviously she wasn't injecting people, maybe not all the time, but she gave her this bitter tasting medicine, and she remembers Jane climbing into bed with her and kind of like kissing her all over her face. But something must have startled Jane and made Jane stop. And the next morning, Amelia just put it down to like a dream, you know, because you wouldn't think that your nurse would get into bed with you and start kissing your face. So you would think, oh my God, I must have been really out of it. But yeah, Amelia did not know how close she came to being one of Jane's victims. So in 1889, Jane was recommended for a position at Massachusetts General Hospital. This was classed as a very prestigious medical facility, but upon arrival, Jane couldn't help herself and she continued to experiment with opiates on her patients. So she just handed them to anyone and everyone, like, you know, with some morphine, here you go, hey, morphine. So based on this, her time there really didn't last long. She was let go from Massachusetts General Hospital, and Cambridge Hospital took her back, even based on the fact that she was misusing opiates and giving them to everyone. So when she got back to Cambridge, again, she wasn't liked by her colleagues and she misused opiates constantly, so she was let go from another job. But even though they knew that she misused these drugs, they recommended her to be a private nurse. So Jane gave this impression of this like highly professional person, nurse to her patients, to these wealthy patients that she'd been recommended to by the hospital. So she seemed compassionate, cheerful, carried on the nickname of Jolly Jane, when in fact she used to like to guzzle beer, tell dirty jokes and gossip all of the time. I mean, she just loves a good gossip, doesn't she? She just can't get enough of a good old goss. So Jane did befriend her landlord, who was Israella Dunham, and his wife, and you know, she was very good friends with them, but she killed them she gave them opiates and they died. And they became Jane's first documented kill, even though she's probably killed all these people in the hospital, all these poor people. They were Jolly Jane's first documented kill. Jane told police that she killed these poor people because they'd become too old and fussy. I mean, God, I'm fussy now. It's not a reason to kill someone, really, is it? Okay, so I've just put my lashes on. I feel like I've glued my eyes together. Ooh, don't you hate it when that happens? But, you know, looking good. I feel like they are anyway. So, after Jane had killed her landlord and his wife, she also killed her friend. I'm not sure of the name of the friend, but she was a matron at a dining hall in St John's Theological School in Cambridge. However, once killing this friend and stealing this job, Jane didn't last long because she was a little thief as well. She was a liar, she was a murderer, and she was a thief. So, you know, she had a hat trick going on, didn't she, really? So, you know, and she liked to help herself to other people's money and was fired very, very quickly from that job. You know, as you would be. So in the summer of 1899, Jane did go to visit Elizabeth. Remember the sister Elizabeth? Foster sister Elizabeth. So Elizabeth supposedly had complained that she was a little bit depressed to Jane. You know, she's a little bit down, not feeling it. But Jane, being Jolly Jane, the nurse that she is, soon came to the rescue of her sister Elizabeth and went to visit her that summer in 1899. Jane took Elizabeth to the beach for a picnic, and she gave her water. She gave her some mineral water that was laced with opiates. But yeah, she laced the mineral water, and Elizabeth sadly died. You know, she killed this girl that she'd lived with, she'd grown up with, and she just killed her. So Jane has later said, once she'd been caught, that she, out of all the killings, she really enjoyed this one. She held her in her arms and watched in delight as she gasped her life out. I mean, why did she do this? Why was she so jealous of Elizabeth? What happened in that house while Jane was growing up that made her so jealous? Or was it just that she was just so unhinged? We'll never know, will we? So it did turn out that Jane had her eye on Elizabeth's husband, Armel. Remember Armel? I'm totally saying it wrong. But yes, Jane had her eye on her sister's husband. You know, as you do. You know, and she wanted to marry this guy as well. She didn't just have set her sights on him. She wanted it. It was like she wanted Elizabeth's life. And when she saw the opportunity, when Elizabeth was, you know, wasn't feeling quite herself, she came to the rescue. I use the term very loosely. You know, for all Elizabeth knew, her sister was this well-respected nurse. Jane comes along and kills the poor girl. You know, poisons her. But within 3 days of Elizabeth dying, Jane did away with the housekeeper, with Elizabeth and Armel's housekeeper, 77-year-old Edna Bannister. So yeah, she killed her too, poisoned her. It's all in the same way, all with opiates, all with the time, all being poisoned. So Jane did this supposedly to take over the house and try and impress Elizabeth's husband with her housekeeping skills, but he was not impressed. He was not impressed one little bit, and made it quite clear that he didn't want Jane as his wife or in his life at all. He didn't want anything to do with Jane. He didn't want her as a wife. He didn't want her as a housekeeper. He just didn't want her. This drove Jane crazy. It drove her out of her mind, drove her off her head, you know. So because Armel had made it very clear that he didn't want Jane in that way. You know, he didn't want her as a housekeeper, he didn't want her as a wife, he didn't want her at all. She came up with this scheme that she was going to poison him and nurse him back to health and be the whole saviour of of the situation. You know, would people not becoming suspicious? You know, her landlord had died, along with his wife. Her friend had died. Her sister had died. You know, I don't know why people were suspicious. I really don't. So anyway, Jane had come up with this plan that she was going to poison him, nurse him back to health, and he was gonna fall for her. He was gonna fall in love with her. This did not work. This did not work. After this, you know, this poisoning attempt didn't work. So Jane threatened to tell people that he had gotten her pregnant. And this absolutely enraged him. He drove him. He was annoyed, to say the least, at this, and just ordered Jane away. Ordered Jane out of his house. He wanted nothing to do with her. Absolutely nothing to do with Jane at all. So after this, Jane tried to take her own life, overdosing on morphine, but this failed as well, and she went to hospital, and upon her release she went to visit her friend Sarah Nichols, who lived with a brother. So after this, Jane, it's now 1901, and Jane moved in with elderly Alden Davis, and she rented a cottage from Alden. Now we know what she does to her landlords, don't we? Not good. So Jane, liking a bit of a drink and a bit of a gamble and all her other things that she liked to do, she couldn't keep up with the rent of the cottage that she was renting from Alden. So Alden's wife, Mattie, I believe her name is, I'm not sure that that's correct though, tried to collect the money from Jane. You know, these, you know, you gotta charge your rent, man. You gotta charge your rent. So while trying to collect this rent money, poor Mattie was killed using a cocktail of morphine and atropine. You know, so Jane's really, like, she's just going for it, isn't she? She, you know, there's no stopping her. So once Jane had done away with poor Mattie, who only she only wanted rent money, but yeah, this gave Jane the opportunity to move on to Alden and look after him. And you know, Jane looked after him all right, because within 2 weeks, poor Alden was dead. Jane had poisoned him, along with his 2 daughters. Yep. You heard me, along with the poor man's 2 daughters, who were Minnie Gibbs and Geraldine Gordon, who again had passed away within weeks of each other. You know, how is no one noticing this? How is no one noticing this? But someone was starting to notice. Yes, they were. Minnie Gibbs' father-in-law. He noticed. He thought it was strange that a whole family had been killed, or a whole family had mysteriously passed away from similar illnesses, and the same nurses attended to them all. You know, he was suspicious of all these sudden deaths. Why would a whole family that was seemingly healthy just suddenly die? Why had no one noticed this before? Why did it take Minnie Gibbs' father-in-law to notice this? So it was these deaths, you know, these were now going to be Jane's downfall, really. You know, had she become sloppy because she'd not been caught before and killed this whole family for no apparent reason? So it was the rest of the Davis family that went to the police and reported this, you know, suspicions, and the body of Minnie Davis was exhumed, and an autopsy. I mean, why didn't they do an autopsy before? I just don't know. See, these historic cases get me, because people got away with so much for so long. But yeah, the autopsy revealed that she had morphine and atropine in her system, and it was confirmed that Minnie had, unfortunately and sadly, been poisoned. So anyway, the police were assigned to watch Jane in October of 1901, and it was after police were assigned to watch Jane that they did arrest her. I don't know what they saw her doing, but they arrested her. And it was in the summer of 1902 that Jane went to trial in Barnstaple County Courthouse. Jane confessed to a lawyer that she killed at least 31 people, perhaps as many as 100. Remember, she started off a nursing career at Cambridge, and she went to another hospital, then she went back to that hospital, and then she became a private nurse to the wealthy. So, you know, God knows how long she was actually getting away with this stuff. It's just, let's say, it just blows my mind that even just, you know, 100 years ago, this was what was happening. She also wanted to be found sane, because she knew that if she was found insane, she was never ever going to be released. So Jane did claim that she started killing people because her boyfriend had dumped her. So this said boyfriend had dumped her when she was 16, and he was an office worker, and he'd given her a promise ring, but he'd later fell in love with someone else and moved. So, you know, that promise ring meant a lot, didn't it? And she was reported as saying, "If I had been a married woman, I probably would not have killed all of those people. I would have had my husband, my children and my home to take up my mind." So it took a jury just 27 minutes to find Jane guilty by reason of insanity. So she did not get her wish. She was not found sane, because what sane person kills 31 people because their boyfriend dumped them years before? Nobody. Nobody. That's who. Absolutely nobody. So even though Jane still insisted she was sane, I mean, she's saying, you know, I knew what I was doing. And she probably did, but we're saying a sane person doesn't do that. You know, Jane insisted that she was sane because she knew what she was doing was wrong. So after the guilty verdict, Jane was committed to the Taunton Insane Hospital, and here she spent the rest of her life, and she died on the 17th of August 1938. So some attendants are reported as saying, "Get some morphine, dearie, we'll go on the ward and we'll watch them die." I mean, if that's not insane, I don't know what is. But that is the story of Jolly Jane, or the Angel of Mercy. If you've made it this far through the video, then thank you so much for watching. This is my first true crime video, and I really enjoyed researching it, and I really enjoyed putting it all together. I don't think I could do one of these a week because there's a lot of research involved and I just don't have the time to do that, but I am hoping to do one a month. So if you did enjoy this, please comment down below, give me a thumbs up, a like, all of that type of stuff. And you know, I really do like the historic ones, because it just beggars belief how much people got away with even as little as 100 years ago, and how much technology has advanced to catch people more quickly. You know, you get what I'm saying, you get what I'm saying. But if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, all of that stuff, and I will see you in the next video, guys. Bye!